Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. I recently joined as a member, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co. And when you go to apply and they ask you, how did you hear about Podgo? Make sure you tell them that the Vault Classic Music Review sent you.
Welcome to the Vault Podcast, Classic Music Reviews, presented by IV Creative. Now, here's your hosts, B. Cox and the crew.
Greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Vault Podcast, Classic Music Reviews, presented by IV Creative. It's a perspective on the classics from a fresh point of view. We appreciate you for taking your time and lending your ears to our perspective. You'll be anywhere listening to anything, but you're right here with us, so we thank you. With you today is yours truly, B. Cox, and it's a special edition, a bonus episode of the Vault Classic Music Reviews today. It's the Guest Lounge, and I am very pleased today of who I'm welcoming into the Guest Lounge. Coming in today is a brother that I followed on social media. We connected with each other. He is a fellow content creator and a lover of hip-hop music and hip-hop culture. Today in the Guest Lounge, we have the pleasure of welcoming the Professor, Nathan T. Rideaux. He is the owner of Urban Science Media, LLC, and also the creator, writer of the hottest hip-hop scripted podcast. Matter of fact, the number one hip-hop scripted podcast out there, called Playerz From The South, Playerz with a Z. And it's been great. He's doing a lot of things out there. He's had a couple of different podcasts. He's done a documentary called We Are One. And we're going to sit down and talk to him a little bit about his ventures, talk to him about his podcast, and also a little bit about hip-hop culture down in the South where he's from, and get into a really great conversation. So sit down, relax, kick back, and listen to my conversation with Nathan Rideaux, the Professor of Urban Science Media and Playerz From The South. Here it is. And joining us here in the Guest Lounge in the Vault is a very special guest, a gentleman that I've been following here since I've been in the podcasting game. And we connected a little bit through social media, which you do sometimes when you're in these circles, and especially when you have content creation in the circle of hip hop. And we definitely followed each other. I've been very impressed by what this brother has done. I like to refer to him as an OG, but I'll give him an even more proper title, and that's Professor. So it's an apt title because that's what he goes by on social media, but he is indeed a professor, the Professor Nathan T. Rideaux. He is the owner of Urban Science Media and the creator of one of the hottest podcasts out there, scripted podcasts, really great content called Playerz From The South. Professor Nathan, thank you for joining us here on the Guest Lounge, man.
Thank you for having me, bro. Thank you. I don't take this time lightly. Actually, I take it as an honor because, like you said, we've been following each other and communicating, I guess, a little bit over a year. Mm-hmm. And I've been following what you do, too, man. And I really appreciate anybody who's, like myself, a curator of hip-hop culture. Indeed. We're special people, man. And I think we deserve props for keeping legacies alive. Absolutely, man. And the culture calls for it.
We have to be the one to write the stories of our culture. I think I remember seeing something, I think it was from you or it may have been somebody else, something like you waited so long to be able to have a job in media or hip hop media. Then you realize that you were hip hop media because you lived it, you've breathed it, and you're the ones to tell the story. So, That's an important part about it. So, man, I thank you again for joining us. And, you've had a lot of good stuff coming out, man. We connected, as we said, on social media. Right. Nathan reached out to me. I was looking for some contributors to sort of work on some of the content I got coming on. We haven't hooked up yet this year, but next year we got some dope things going on. As y'all noticed, man, we're doing 91, 96, and 2001 next year. And I got a lot of good things we're going to come up with. But we connected. He told me he was working on this podcast, Playerz in the South, and we'll get into that, man, because, again, it's an incredible piece of work, and I encourage everybody to go out there and look into it. So the one thing I want to get into, man, is just for those of the people who are listening and maybe listening to your voice for the very first time, right. Tell us a little bit about your background, man, and like what made you want to get into content creation and podcasting, and what drove your focus as far as hip hop towards that focus of that creation.
Well, man, that's a good question, and it's and that's the good thing about hip hop history. I think we all from different backgrounds, different regions. We all have our own story to tell.
Yeah.
And you know, with me, I call myself a down south b-boy because, you know, I was born in 73, July 15th, 1973. You know, I grew up with hip hop, and, you know, although I lived in the South in Louisiana where I grew up, you know, my experiences were no different than those that came up in New York City, you know, as far as listening and following the culture from an early age. So, you know, I have those early experiences with hip hop. I'm talking 9-10 years old, man, going to the skating rink, listening to Planet Rock and stuff, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it got to a point, I guess, throughout my life, I called myself down south b-boy. Like I said, I was a guy from New York that moved to Lafayette, Louisiana. He was from Queens, and he was a little Puerto Rican kid. Taught me how to tag my name up. You know, I started breakdancing back then and everything. And I finally tried my hand at, I went ahead, I think I was 17 years old in 1990. I started rapping. And I heard, you might have heard me on one of my shows. I said it was Ice Cube's verse on the DOC's album on the grand finale.
Yes.
When Ice Cube said, "Picture a nigga that's raw, amplify his ass, and what you see is what's saw."
Yeah.
And that blew my mind, man. And I wanted to, because of that, that got me into writing my first song. I started rapping at that particular time, and I still lived in New Orleans at the time. I was just finished my senior year in high school, man, and then I had just moved to Atlanta. And things changed, you know, the whole landscape of everything changed for me. I had to meet new people and everything. So connected with people through hip hop and everything. And it was just a part of my life. And throughout my life journey, I guess as a rapper, I always could write. And what hip hop did for me was gave me the hustle to know how to want to try new things. So at a particular time in my life, I tried journalism because I always had a love for words because I was a rapper and I knew how to write. So, man, I always connected with the right people at the right time. So I became a sports writer. I was writing for the newspaper here in Atlanta for the AJC. I did some, magazines, Gospel Today magazine. I did a big article. So I tried my hand at that. So I started a radio show with no experience, man. I taught myself all this, and I guess it just all led to where I am today. So because of this, I knew how to write, construct a story, and Playerz From The South came about because I was writing a movie script first.
Yeah.
And my wife was the one who listened to podcasts and drama and true crime, and she said, "Why don't you try to turn it into a podcast?" And Playerz From The South was born, right there. And I took all of my life's, even though it's a fiction, it's audio drama and a fiction podcast. The first hip hop, I like to stake claim to that. The first hip hop fiction podcast series. It's fiction, but about maybe 30% of the work into the script is like part of my real life stuff I've experienced through my hip hop journey and stuff I've read about or heard about other artists, producers, or something from the region I'm from, which is the Third Coast.
Yeah, Third Coast, man. Yeah, definitely down there, man. That Gulf Coast has a very rich hip hop tradition, and I wanted to ask you that because myself, we're almost like a cut from the same shoe, man. I went to school. I studied at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland, historically black college. I studied journalism. My idea was to be actually in sports journalism. And I got out of school, man, and I had to really start and work and support myself from the beginning. And I went out to go a lot of interviews, a lot of little small newspapers to really just get my foot in the door. But they wanted me to work for free. Right. And I had to start paying student loans 6 months after I graduated, bruh. So I kind of got away from the journalism thing. I did some freelance things, but like yourself, man, I started my hip hop journey by emceeing and eventually also then producing as well.
Okay.
So that's what really struck me when listening to Playerz From The South. I'm hearing you mention and things about, the process of making the music, these characters, and I'm hearing these vintage equipment that I only, didn't really operate on myself, but I know about because I've studied the history, ASR 10s, SP 1200, Techniques, turntables. And I'm like, okay, this sounds like somebody who's been involved in the process of not just listening to the music, but also possibly creating it as well. So that's really what struck me when listening to it, man.
Yeah, I had to be as detail oriented as possible, man, because it was a special time coming up in the time when we came up, because everybody you saw wasn't a producer or wasn't a rapper. It was just cool to sit out and be a fan.
Yeah.
And, for those who did try their hand at rapping at that time, as I said, everybody wasn't trying it. So when you did meet somebody, you stayed in touch. So whenever somebody had something you need, they hook you up with this, they hook you up with that. They referred you to a DJ. They referred you to, so, everybody kind of looked out for each other like that. So, man, throughout my experiences, I was in a lot of people's homes, studios, DJ setups. And I just seen, I tried my hand at producing one time. It never worked out. But I tried my hand at DJing. I just didn't think I was coordinated enough. But I've been in those situations, in those settings with dudes with records all over the place, in ciphers, passing the mics back and forth. And I think that was just, it was a special time, man.
Yeah. And, obviously, you, as you mentioned, you said you grew up with hip hop. You literally were born weeks away from when hip hop first had its first, at 1520 with Chedrick Avenue with DJ Kool Herc in the park, man. So you grew up with this culture. You come from the old school. You come from an era which a lot of folks, your contemporaries will say was the golden era of hip hop, the true golden era of hip hop into the 80s when hip hop weaved itself into the consciousness of America, and then eventually made its way from one coast past the country over to another coast and down throughout the country and eventually through the world. I hear this a lot, especially in the podcast, and not to give away too many things, but we talk a lot, and there's been a lot of things said about the bias from folks who were on either coast, but particularly from the East Coast in those early days, about anything coming out from really anything other than New York, but mostly with things that were coming from the South, from guys who were from Miami or Atlanta or New Orleans or Houston. It was almost like they looked at it, like you said, like you were outsiders, but, like you didn't belong in the culture. But, the stories that are being told, your documentary, We Are One, does a great job of documenting that as far as the journey of people there in that region when it comes to street music, to hip hop, to the beginnings of that type of music down there in the culture, what happened in Houston with, the Rap-A-Lot cats, and then anything from folks with DJ Screw. Man, what was it really like for those of us who weren't in a part or in that region of the country during their early days of hip hop? Because some people will sort of think that y'all didn't discover hip hop until the late 80s, early 90s, but y'all were there ever since the beginning, man. What was that like?
Man, let me tell you like this. At the time, like I said, when I first moved to Atlanta, this is pre-Outkast and everything. Matter of fact, when I was a rapper, one of the first demo tapes I've sent off was to LaFace Records. And I got a handwritten letter from the VP of LaFace, it was courteous telling me pretty much, letting me down. And they weren't ready because the only artist they had at a particular time was Jermaine Jackson, the only artist on LaFace. So here we are 3 years later, and Outkast was our Playerz Ball, and then LaFace is in the rap business a few years later. So Atlanta didn't have on an independent grind what the Third Coast did. A lot of that was culture driven. A lot of it was street driven. I mean, most of it was street driven. A lot of dudes hustling decided they wanted to get into the rap business, and they had the money to put their homeboy on, to do their first record, things like that. So I think all that ties into that independent grind, which is, later came to be guys like Baby and Slim at Cash Money, of course, Master P. You had Tony Draper at Suave House. All came behind, Luke Skywalker and Lil J at Rap-A-Lot, So it was that natural, organic grind. Before you really could get in the music business, you had to get your hustle game had to be on. And they learned it, they learned it along the way. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate that. But now at the age, I can look back at it now and see how many dudes became entrepreneurs just out of the street game and learn. And I think it's funny because I just watched the Netflix thing, Evolution of Hip Hop, yesterday. And I think it was Willie D said, we thought they didn't like us just because we was from the South. And he said that wasn't it. They just didn't like us because we said anything we wanted. Anything came out of our mouth was vulgar. It was, and I think that also came because you didn't have the A&Rs of the major labels in New York and LA.
Not at all.
All over your back, so you could say what you want to say in the South, and you could put it out, and the streets would love it first before you broke out of your region.
Yeah, and in a way, down to that Third Coast, man, particularly, man, New Orleans and Houston, and down to Texas, all up and down, you guys were almost ahead of the game. Because as you mentioned, man, a lot of the cats who were coming out of New York or wherever they were coming from in the Northeast, wherever the powerhouses were on either coast, you had labels who were handling these guys. You looked at what P was doing with No Limit, what Baby and Slim were doing with Cash Money, what Jay Prince and like what they were doing with Rap A Lot, and then also what Screw was doing with making his own tapes and basically starting enterprises independently, selling out of the trunk of your car, getting the mom and pop shops to run your stuff, or eventually opening your own store. It was like cats down there really were interested in controlling their own destiny, and that's, I think, to me, is really what made it a little bit more raw, and that's what I think gave the appeal to folks down there in the Third Coast, is because, excuse me for saying this, it's like y'all really didn't give a fuck, man. Y'all were about y'all money, about hustling, about making a name and making a statement for yourself. Do you think that's part of the appeal? Why people look at, because at first I didn't get it until I got involved a little bit more in the game, and I was like, yo, these cats really down here handling their biz, man. Yeah, like, do you think that's part of the appeal of why people are drawn to these Third Coast artists, man? Like, because of that.
Oh, most definitely. And that's it. I think that's why this shit is so dope to me, because when I can look back at it and I see guys like, especially in Houston, and I mentioned like a couple of the distributors, like on Playerz From The South, I mentioned the distributors. The name of that Gonzalez, that was a real distributor. They had the guys like that, the regional distributors, man, and the guys just learned the business from doing their street numbers, man, and going back and forth to the distributors and picking up their checks. And you look at the numbers alone, just like in Texas, man, you could be independent without a middleman and getting your paper, just selling your number in Texas and expressing your culture your way. So I think what's to be admired is that there was a whole matrix created outside of the mainstream matrix of hip hop that didn't rely on the mainstream. It relied on the culture of each region. Like New Orleans had their own thriving in the early 90s. And I'm talking about, most people don't even know that Cash Money was out in like 91. Baby's name was B32. I Need a Bag of Dope. People don't even realize they don't even realize they had other labels, Mobo Joe, putting out that raw gangster shit in the early 90s. And these dudes was all just learning it at the time, man. And then you had other labels that came, over to Houston too. And I think, and you see, the good thing with me, I'm originally from Lake Charles, Louisiana. I lived in Lafayette. I lived in New Orleans, and then I moved to Atlanta. But I got family all over the Gulf Coast, between New Orleans and Houston, man. I got family all in between, so I can enjoy both sides. I can enjoy the whole Third Coast. I know all the culture, I know it. The thing about me is in the 90s, I think I was all into East Coast. I was really all into East Coast, as I said, because when I lived in Atlanta, we didn't have that regional stuff coming up from the Third Coast up here. So the records we heard living in Atlanta at the time were bass music, like the local, that's, the Atlanta version with bass music that derived from Miami. Yeah. And I went home to Louisiana in 96. I had been gone for 5 years. I didn't go home. So I went home in 96, man. And I'm going to tell you, I went home to Lake Charles. And the shit was different because we were grown now. I was like about 23. Yeah. So, niggas was getting shot. People, I was hearing shit. And it's like they had their own music, their own soundtrack to what was going on down there. Yeah. And while I was down there, my cousin put me on the Face Mob and the Ghetto Boys Resurrection had just dropped. And it was like P. Bout It came out that summer. Mystical came, Here I Go. All that shit was dropping in 96. And then Ball and G. They were already out, but man, it was like all that shit just hit at the right time. And then in the radios, especially in Atlanta, I like to give credit. I think Greg Street, was breaking all that Third Coast music and all that down south shit. Yeah. In Atlanta, he was breaking it at the time, and I think that's when it just really just exploded.
Yeah, man. There was a certain point in time in the 90s when I think everything sort of came together, from the Mid-South to the Third Coast to the Southeast. Everything sort of came together, and that's like right around 94 to 96, right in between that time period, heading into that. And then after that, pretty much once 97 hit, man, everything really started to break open. People started to find out about 3-6 Mafia. They started to find out about Ball and G. I knew about Ball and G because I was reading the source, man. And I was reading about Ball and G then, and also seeing their advertisements for their tapes. And that's when I started to go pick they tapes up, when nobody in DC was really checking for 8-Ball and MJG like that, man. Yeah. So it really started to get people to notice what was going on down there. And there was hate. There's been hate everywhere. But, we notice, and I can appeal to that being where I'm from. And that sort of takes me into my next question. And to preface it with this, I made my first trip down to New Orleans for the first time last year in November. I went for my homeboy's birthday. He was turning 40 years old. I'd never been to New Orleans before. We actually stayed not too far away. We stayed in the French Quarter. We stayed not too far away from Bourbon Street. And let me tell you something. That's the last time that I will ever stay that close to Bourbon Street. Because I went with my lady, man, and bruh, it was nothing but noise all night long. And it's like it just kept going. And I wanted to take that into the documentary you did, We Are One. And it struck me because of a lot of the things that were in here sort of appealed to me because I'm from D.C. This is the home of go-go music, home of Chuck Brown. You know, we're used to having street musicians and things out there. The things that I saw in New Orleans when I went there for the first time, boys out there playing on the buckets, trying to get some tips. People out there with brass instruments and second lines and all these things happening appealed to me because it really struck to me at my core what a lot of what go-go music was like at home. Right. So tell me what your inspiration around making that documentary to be able to cover everything and how big of a task was that? Getting all that together, man, because doing a documentary of something of that wide of a topic in a city like New Orleans couldn't have been easy. Right.
And, you know, that time of my life, man, that was a special time in my life. I lived in New Orleans my high school years between the age of like 13, the summer of between 8th and 9th grade, and till I was senior in high school. I was almost 18. And at the time, you know, all we had was, you know, we had national artists. Of course, we listened to NWA, Broke Big, and everything like that, and Public Enemy, of course, the Stetsasonic, and all that. It's like that city is so fucking dope, man. When I first moved there, I lived 2 hours. Lafayette is like 2 hours away. When I first moved, before I moved to New Orleans, my pops was there first. His job was transferring him, so he was there 3 months before us. So we would go and visit him. And while we were there, I would just leave the hotel and just walk around Playerz and Canal Street by myself. As I've always been that way. And you could just smell the food, and the city just moved to a different rhythm. You could hear music coming out of everywhere. You know, it's just rhythmic, man. And that shit just always resonated with me. Yeah. So that's why I think everything in my creative life that I've ever done, I give credit. That's why I call New Orleans home, even though I'm not a native there. I lived there a part of my life. Yeah. It just resonated with me, and it's just that rhythm of it. And you know, it came to prove itself a little later with Cash Money, with Manny Fresh and them. That was when I was in high school, Manny Fresh did a song with Gregory D, Buck Jump Time, and that shit, man, they were local to us at the time, but it made me see that, you know, it can be done. You know, it could be done with the New Orleans sound, because man, Manny Fresh is such a wizard on them drums and the rhythms, bruh. A lot of people don't get it, but you had to walk those streets to actually get it. You know?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And the New Orleans, a lot of the hooks, come from the chants, the Mardi Gras Indians. There's so much in the culture that they were able to put into a hip hop form, you know, and show the rest of the world. So it's more than just soldier rags, white tees, and jabots. It was a lot more than that involved. If people really understand, it's a special place.
Yeah, it is, man. I noticed that when I went there, and the one thing that kind of struck with me about being in New Orleans is the feeling that you sort of get that, you know, you're in a unique place that you're never going to go anywhere else in the United States and meet a place like New Orleans. And it's everything from the culture to the music to the people. Right. I mean,
and pardon me for a second. And that's the thing, man. Yeah. Like I said, when I moved there, and just like when I moved to Atlanta, I did the same thing. I caught the city bus and rode around, and happened to get off one day, and I was walking down the street, didn't even know where I was, and I ended up coming through one of the roughest projects in the city, you know, and people like looked out for me, showed me love, and this is like they've always accepted me. So, you know, that was always home to me, and that's why when it came time to doing this documentary, We Are One, Street Music of New Orleans, I just had to reach, you know, that's the good thing, like you said earlier, social media is a thing, because I had no experience making movies, nothing. I just said, you know what, I want to do that. I want to go document, you know, this part of my life and what led to what led to New Orleans music becoming what it has in hip hop and bounce. Yeah. So through social media, I met people who put me in touch with people, and down there, man, people just so cool. Yeah, let's do it. And that's the thing. When I went down there to film it in 2012, man, I had people actually waiting on me to be in it. And in contrast to Atlanta, it ain't that. Yeah. You got to go through hell and high water to get, you know, people trying to big time you. Yeah, I was about to say something. I ain't gonna get into that.
Okay, no worries. It's all good.
But you know how I could be as a show host. You try to
of course.
line up stuff with people, and I've had professional people here in Atlanta. This is what I'm trying to do. I went and rent studio time, and they don't call. And they knew it. They confirmed they would be there, and it was that kind of thing. But like I said, in New Orleans, man, the people just showed me love. People waiting on me to come down there, and I think in the next year after next, we're gonna go do a 10-year anniversary of the documentary.
Man, that'd be cool, bro. And and I would love to be down there for something like that, because I already told my lady, look, we going back down there. She went to school down there, man. My fiance went to Xavier, Oh, for sure. So we actually went a ride, we rode around, went to Xavier. We passed by Dillard. We were in the quarter most of the time. But we went out, a little bit out, man, out into the city. We went out to the, the Garden District and everything else, and went around. Just really was a special place, man. The people, though, the thing that really struck me the most was about the people being down there, man. Yeah, like New Orleans people, will have you cracking the hell up, laughing, and about the things that they say. Man, I ran into this old white dude, man. This old man, he was country, and he had jokes for days about us. He was our Uber driver, and he cracked us up the entire way he got there. He said, "Look, man, I'm trying to be a stand-up comedian. Look, here's my Instagram page. Go check me out and everything. Like, I appreciate it. Y'all be safe now." Yeah. So I love to be able to check that out, man. It's a special place. But I wanted to get a little bit more into about Playerz From The South. And again, to y'all listening, make sure y'all go check it out. I know y'all thinking like, yo, scripted podcast. Like, listen, yes, there's scripted podcasts out there. And what my man Nathan has out there is dope, man. And you have a lot of folks involved in it. I mean, like, I've seen that you had cast the characters. You have, yourself, you play the main character, Kevon Terry. You have your journalist Saul Gravy, who's interviewing Kevon, which serves as the basis for this story. And you've actually had your family involved with some of this too, man. They've played some bit parts in this as well.
Oh man, that's good you noticed that. Yeah. It's like, man, this is my first foray into. I started podcasting maybe 2017 after listening to Combat Jack, man. So I wanted to get into
rest in peace, Combat. Hey, rest in peace, Combat.
Yeah, that's the best, man. The best. And I tried my first show was the Genius Generation. I did that, and I couldn't get into what I wanted. I said, I couldn't, like I said earlier, get the guests I was trying to line up and stuff. So I figured a way I can do something without having to rely on getting guests for a show. Let me do this scripted podcast. So I just do what I do best, which is write, put that thing in, like I said earlier, into scripted form. Whenever, no experience, man. I'm just learning on the fly, and so I don't know how to go get a cast of characters. Yeah. So whenever I just need a voice, I holler at a family member. I got my nephew who's a teenager. He played young Cortez.
Okay.
My sister-in-law, man, she was Dana. She was actually the love interest of Kevon Theory.
Okay.
I got co-workers in there that plays my younger brother Cortez, which is in the last episode with the flashback phone call.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, man. And then Saul Gravy, that's another one of my co-workers, man. He used to host Genius Generation with me. People just interested in just looking out for me, doing what, happy to see me doing what I do. So they just lend me their voice. And we just get it popping. And I do direct. I'm learning how to direct and everything. No, say it like this. Say it like,
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, and I think I like the results, man.
Man, that's awesome, man. It's an awesome piece of work. I love the creative aspect of it because, again, coming up in the culture, living that independent life where, I was out there, I'd recorded, put out some projects, did shows, did that whole like road trip. Like, I wasn't riding to Atlanta, but I was in my area. I was riding down to Richmond for some shows or Norfolk, you know what I'm saying? Going up to Philly, New York. So I know that whole independent grind, man, it captures it perfectly because you talking about the same type of thing so many people went through it either at that time or through it right now, go through it, man. So I think that's what the appeal about it is. I'm waiting for the next episode. I need to get episode number 6. And is this year, are you going to have seasons of this? Are you going to limit it to like seasons, or are you just going to is it going to continue on and on through the different episodes that you have?
Well, actually, since you asked, episode 6 will be the season finale of season 1.
Got it. Okay.
And what I plan on doing with Playerz From The South, that name, actually, the name Playerz From The South came from I think it was one of the No Limit releases had the classic song. It was still at 1995. That still Southern, that Third Coast sound was still in its infancy, man. You know, we had the heavy 808, but
808,
you know,
yeah.
Pimp C brought that gospel organ, that, you know, to hip hop. So that Playerz From The South, Stack G's, you know, that's where I had to get that name, and you know, that's the way I show love to that era. So I had to call it Playerz From The South. Now with season 2, I want to change. I want to keep the same storyline, but I want to incorporate, just to give you a little bit, Kevon's son, who I started to introduce at the end of season 1. His son will be a big part of season 2. Cool. And I like to take, as I said, real live topics and include in here, because you can, you know, I talk about everything in here, man. And so season 2, I want to take the real live situation that former No Limit artist Mac is going through, dealing with the Louisiana justice system.
Yeah.
I'm going to incorporate that into season 2 with Kevon's son going through something, you know, and the villains, the people who play the villains, you know, want to railroad his son and put him in a bad situation.
Art imitating life, man. You know,
Right.
it's a wonderful thing. So I got a couple other things, man, before we wrap up. I do see that you have a new project coming out, man. It's International Food Dope. I saw the post come up on your Instagram.
Yeah.
Give the people a little bit of preview of what they can expect from this new project coming out.
Yeah, man. I didn't want to be, you know, like I said, didn't want to do the traditional type of thing. So that's why I had to do Playerz From The South. And I say if I want to do a hip hop show, let me do something with food, because I think over the last few years I started, you know, me and my wife, we're empty nesters, so we enjoy fine dining out, you know, right now. So it's just something I just started getting into. I guess a guilty pleasure, man. I kind of always wanted to be a chef, but never wanted to go after it. So I'm International Food Dope is my new show, where I'll be interviewing hip hop inspired and influenced executive chefs, restaurateurs, and food influencers, and we're gonna have conversations talking about making the perfect plate in parallel, you know, in comparison to making the perfect record. You know, the dope elements that makes a dope hip hop record. And you know, I look at like chefs, they got to be cocky, they got to be like MCs. So you know, when you make that plate, you look at yourself and you say, "Damn, I'm the shit."
Yeah.
Same way MC would do with a rhyme. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So and we're gonna talk about the classics. It's kind of like, you know, just like what you do here, man. We just want and find the parallels in between those two worlds.
Cool, man. So for my last official question, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit here, you know,
Right.
and I got to bring your expertise. So you're riding from New Orleans over to Atlanta, okay? It's a nice little drive. I don't know how many hours it is, but it's some hours. And you riding, and let's say me and you are riding, man. And I'm telling you, like, hey, man, give me Nathan Rideaux's perfect Southern hip hop playlist that will bring me through your journey as far as everything from the Third Coast and anything on that of Southern hip hop. You got 5 CDs we can pick, man. Give me 5 that's going to give me your Southern hip hop journey.
Oh, man.
Yeah, me and you, we riding from New Orleans to Atlanta, man. What 5 you got?
6.5 hour drive.
6.5 hour drive. Give me 5
Yes, sir.
CDs, man.
5 CDs, definitely. I'm going to give you The Diary by Scarface. A.T. Aliens, Outkast. I'm going to give that UGK Riding Dirty, of course. Juvenile, Soldier Rag.
Okay.
And yeah, Grip It on that other level, Ghetto Boys.
Ghetto Boys, man.
Yeah.
You know,
I forgot to mention how big of an influence they were. You know, in my story, man, I got some stories to tell.
Yeah.
I got stories to tell. That's why I'm putting them all my stories in Playerz From The South. Yeah. But I also had to mention, man, a few years ago, you know, I went through a period of my life, man, I wasn't listening to hip hop at all. I'm talking like maybe 15 something years, and
wow.
I was busy, you know, raising my kids and everything. So I got to the point where my kids got of age, so I started getting back into it. So I started listening to revisiting. This had to be maybe 2014, revisiting old classics. And then from there, I started listening to like Ghostface and Mobb Deep and everything. And it took me down the path of listening to stuff that I missed out on. And through all that, after I listened to all the East Coast stuff that I missed out on and hearing all this stuff, around 2017, man, I got to my down south stuff and I went to UGK. And that shit opened me up to a whole new world. I mean, I always knew about Chad and Bun. Yeah. But man, I'm talking to see the evolution of what that group did and what they became. Yeah, but and the name UGK is Underground Kings. That's like I tell people, that's the name for a reason. Yeah. just because you don't know about them don't mean they're not one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, bro.
And I'm talking to hear the sound evolve from where they were with Pocket Full of Stones and even, you know, Cocaine in the Back of the Ride to the last album they put out when Pimp had passed with the International Players Anthem, the double album. That's an incredible album.
Underground Kings,
Underground Kings. And as a man of my age, 47 right now, I can sit back and I just like listening to the music of hip hop and how dope producers put shit together that I might not have understood it, because back in the days, you listen to shit, is like, oh, that's dope, that's whack. But now I can listen to something and be like, damn, I can find pretty much something dope in everything, man.
Yeah, indeed, man. That last UGK album, man, it really, and it struck home for me after Pimp died. But I got a late pass getting on to UGK. I didn't really get on to them until I got to college, man, and that was like around 2000. But it was incredible just to be able to hear them back together again, because Pimp was locked up, so Bump was holding it down by himself out here by himself, man. To hear them back together again and to hear just the quality of the things that they were able to put together, like they had never lost a step, man. And then they took it to another level because then the consciousness of people's consciousness, it raised to another level when you put them with Outkast and you get a smash like International Players Anthem. But then there was so many deep album cuts on there. Right. That was so great, man. I always have an appreciation for UGK. For Bun B and for them lyrically being better than people want to give them credit for being, man. Right. And people, a lot of people gave a lot of flack for Southern rappers, man. Some Southern rappers there that are some great MCs. And both Chad and Bun B, in both of their ways, man, were extraordinary MCs and the unique styles they had, different from each other, but it complemented each other well. So exactly. I'm glad that you mentioned that, though. Seriously, and
it's a damn shame that Jive Records didn't know what to do with them. It's a damn and I read the book. I read the book Julia Beverly did on Pimp C, and it's like at one time they were told they weren't video friendly, so that's why they never wasted time, giving them videos. But I'm like, man, so it's like if everybody's doing the verses and everything now. I'm like, I could put 20 UGK songs against 20. Anybody
against anyone. Yeah.
And I tell anybody, just because you don't know, don't mean you ain't gonna come out of this. You ain't gonna be, you ain't gonna be jamming with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's you're right, man. You can put 20 UGK hits up, man, and you'll be hard pressed to find a group out there that can match them firepower for style, substance, legacy, and really just anything that you want to put there, man. Measurement you wanted to put a hip hop track up against. You'll be hard pressed to find somebody that can match the Kings on that, man. But absolutely. Very cool, man. Now, before we get out of here, I always ask my guests to plug all their social media channels and where people can find you, websites, man. So go ahead, run down the list, social media, websites, how people can find you, how they can get in touch with you, and definitely plug the podcast, bro.
Okay, thank you, bro. And before I do that, let me say, man, I listened to your last show about Brand Nubian. Yeah. And dope as well, man. It brought back a lot of memories to when I first moved here, like I said, to Atlanta, my senior year in high school, when they had just dropped Sunshine. And and the Grand Poobah, his debut album was 92. Yeah. It was because it was highly anticipated. And I remember he had the song with Mary J. Blige on that remix that introduced her, getting ready to come into her debut album. And, it was a dope show indeed, man. I appreciate it. To me, it introduced the 5% ideology into my consciousness.
Yeah, definitely. For a lot of people too, man, because there weren't many groups that were out there that all of them were members of the 5% Nation, and you could see it all throughout their music, those influences. And a lot of people followed up afterwards, man, because there's a lot of acts that were 5%ers that came out and put that in their music as well.
Yeah. And recently I finished writing a book for Daddy-O from Stetson Sonic. I wrote his memoir, and he told me, man, that he's the probably wise, intelligent from Poor Righteous Teachers and Grand Poobah probably dropped more knowledge in their music than anybody in hip hop.
You know what? Yeah. I could see that. I definitely could see that. Absolutely. Yeah. Right. I'm not going to argue with that. Yeah. I'm not going to argue with that, especially somebody of his stature. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
if you said it, you know what, bro? You got it. It must be true, because I'm not going to argue with you.
Soaked up a lot of game from that, man. That's a good dude.
Indeed, man.
Yeah, this is Nathan T. Rideaux, a.k.a. The Professor, the host and the writer of Playerz From The South podcast, hip-hop's first fictional podcast series. You can check me out on any of the major platforms. Also, my new show, International Food Dope. you can be able to, that'll be starting in January. Got some good content coming with that. That'll be on all the major platforms as well. You can reach out to me on IG at theprofessor73, at Playerz From The South with a Z. That's at Playerz From The South with a Z, and at Food Dope Podcast.
All right. Well, there we are. There we have it. We appreciate it, man. Nathan, again, thanks for joining us, bruh. Definitely take care. Be safe out here in this world with this pandemic that we have. You and your family be safe, be well. And if you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas to y'all, and happy holidays, man, and much blessings for the new year. And we going to link up next year, man. We got some stuff to put down.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me, man.
And there you have it. I want to give, of course, a special shout out and thank you to the Professor Nathan Rideaux for joining me here again on the Guest Lounge today. As you guys hear, has a lot of great things going on, and can't wait to check out that new podcast coming out, International Food Dope, for 2021, and also the rest of Playerz From The South. Definitely enjoyed the conversation. I look forward to linking up with him in 2021 for doing some real great things, and of course, always reviewing the classics. And that's going to wrap up yet another edition of The Vault. Please make sure you check us out on our new host on Red Circle. You can also download, stream, and subscribe to The Vault Classic Music Reviews on any one of our streaming sources. If you could check us out on any one of our social media pages on the link tree in our bio, you can get to all of our social media sites and also all of our streaming sources. You can get to The Vault Classic Music Reviews on @VaultCMR Podcast on Instagram, @Vault Classic on Twitter, and search the Vault Classic Music Review Podcast on YouTube and on Facebook. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the Facebook page, interact with us on social media. We love to interact with all you, listen to you, let us know what you think about the interview. Of course, we do it here all for you. We appreciate the support, and if you have a friend, tell a friend, and make sure that you tell that friend to tell a friend. Always remember to keep your headphones on and your music loud, but not too loud. And as we close, we like to remind everyone to dream big, because dreams are the basis for creation. Always create, motivate, and elevate, because you were never destined or created to stay stationary in this life. We want to take the opportunity to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays otherwise, and be safe going into the new year. And on that note, we say peace.
Thank you for listening and coming into The Vault. Please subscribe and follow us on Facebook at IV Creative and Instagram at IVECRE8.